Exposed. My daughter-in-law's shocking betrayal for $3 billion. You won't believe my amazing comeback. Caroline's heart raced as she stared at the legal documents sprawled across her desk. This was more than a betrayal. It was a blow to everything she believed in. Rachel, her daughter-in-law, had clearly orchestrated a plan that could dismantle not just Caroline's family, but the very fabric of her late husband's legacy. The once thriving family law firm now felt suffocated by the weight of deceit, and the smell of coffee did little to soothe her frayed nerves. It hung in the air like a bitter reminder of all that was at stake. Throughout her life, Caroline had committed herself to honesty and integrity, qualities she had instilled in her children. Her mind raced with memories of late-night talks with her husband about their shared dreams. Everything they built together seemed ready to crumble beneath the weight of Rachel's ambition. How could Rachel so easily abandon the values they cherished? The thought dug into her chest, twisting until each breath became a struggle. With Rachel plotting to seize a $3 billion inheritance from her estranged family, Caroline was torn. She felt the suffocating grip of fear and betrayal, coupled with desperate resolve. Shouldn't families stand together, especially in dark times? But as the courtroom loomed closer, she felt the gnawing pang of dread surface. The idea that someone she had welcomed into her life would go to such lengths left her shaken. Could Rachel really be so ruthless? Caroline's determination flickered like a low flame against a storm. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The days leading up to the court date were filled with sleepless nights. Caroline wrestled with the gnawing pain in her heart that resided alongside her fierce need for justice. She discovered hidden talents that seemed dormant until now, momentarily igniting her passion to right the wrongs surrounding her. Peter, her retired mentor, offered wise counsel that touched on her lingering doubts. But even with his encouragement, a part of her couldn't shake the fear that any confrontation with Rachel could irrevocably tear the family apart. A bitter irony, the very blood that once united them could now be the source of her deepest anguish. As the courtroom date neared, doubt clouded hundreds of memories crafted from loyalty, but the values of honesty and family would not fade. When Rachel entered the courtroom, all smugness and superficial confidence, Caroline felt her resolve tighten. It was then, standing just outside the courtroom doors, that she questioned everything. Could she truly advocate for justice when her own daughter-in-law was drowning in deceit? Was she ready to confront the ultimate betrayal that had turned her world upside down? Every lesson on courage, every comforting word she offered to her students now questioned her own path. She felt that familiar burning in her chest, but it was no longer just courage sparking within. It was the impending conflict of fierce love and unyielding integrity. As the judge called the court to order, Caroline inhaled deeply, feeling the swell of emotions crash down upon her. Whatever the outcome, she knew one thing: she would not be silenced. As Rachel took the stand, Caroline steeled herself, readying for the battle ahead, their destinies entangled in a turmoil that had just begun to unfold. As the judge's gavel struck, echoing through the courtroom, Caroline felt her pulse quicken. This was no longer just a legal battle, it was a personal war. Time seemed to stretch as Rachel took her seat, confident and seemingly unfazed by the repercussions of her actions. Caroline's heart hammered like a drum, each beat reminding her of the stakes involved. The future of her family's legacy hung in the balance, and the weight of betrayal pressed against her chest. Rachel's voice cut through the air like a knife, rehearsed and smooth as silk. She painted herself as a victim, twisting the narrative to gain sympathy. Caroline fought against the urge to rise and shout, to confront the woman who declared war on everything she held dear. Instead, she remained anchored in her seat, drawing strength from moments of warmth shared with her late husband, a shared glance over dinner, a quiet chuckle over inside jokes, and the unwavering commitment they made to their family. In the back of her mind, Caroline recalled the late-night conversations where her husband had encouraged her to stand firmly for justice, no matter where it led. Perhaps this was her moment to embody those ideals. But doubts swirled within her. Was she ready to confront the person who had once laughed alongside her at Christmas dinners? Could she hold her ground without losing herself in the chaos? The courtroom buzzed, but all Caroline heard was the silence that danced around her own thoughts. If Rachel could manipulate truths for her gain, what did that mean for Caroline? Questions peppered her mind like daggers. Was her integrity strong enough to weather this storm? Could she navigate this moral quagmire and uphold her family's legacy without sacrificing her beliefs? Just as she began to spiral into fear and self-doubt, Caroline's thoughts shifted towards her hidden talents, the resolve she discovered during sleepless nights. She had fought against the tide of fear, practiced her arguments, and brainstormed potential strategies with Peter. If Rachel saw her as a threat, perhaps there was a chance she could outmaneuver her adversary. Taking a steadying breath, Caroline remembered the strong, assertive woman she once was, the attorney unafraid of confrontation. Wasn't it time to channel that energy? She began to formulate a plan, not only to counter Rachel's deceit, but to reclaim her narrative, the story of her family, her values, her legacy. She needed to witness Rachel's entire performance unfold. The sharp glances from the gallery and the whispers of onlookers urged her to act, to present her counter-narrative with honor. As Rachel continued to weave lies, Caroline paid attention, noting weaknesses she could exploit. It wasn't merely about the inheritance. It was about drawing the line between right and wrong. Caroline envisioned presenting the truth, her truth, in a way that embedded the values she cherished deeply. The trial's proceedings moved to a recess, giving Caroline the moment she needed to strategize. She took a seat in a corner, replaying Rachel's words and calibrating her response. A surge of determination welled up within her. She would fight for her family and uphold the legacy her husband had cherished. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of reclamation. Then it happened. The door swung open, and Peter entered, their mentor and guide. He approached her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and steadfast belief in her abilities. "You have to remember," he began quietly, "this isn't just about the law. It's about who you are. Let them see the real you." His words ignited a fire in her. Caroline nodded, her resolve hardening. No longer would she allow herself to be defined by Rachel's treachery. As the court reconvened, and as Caroline rose to present her rebuttal, the room quieted in anticipation. She could feel the eyes upon her, the judgment lingering in the air, but one thing was clear: she would stand tall, ready to expose not only Rachel's deceit but to articulate her own values. As she opened her mouth to speak, a sudden realization struck her like lightning. What if Rachel had allies? What if, amidst this battle, there were additional revelations waiting to surface? The moment for clarity beckoned, and the anxiety grew palpable. The courtroom waited, and so did Caroline, ready to unearth the layers of deceit, but wondering, was the truth she held truly enough to secure her family's legacy? The tension in the room heightened as Caroline stepped forward, her heart pounding yet grounded with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The judge's gaze fixed on her, and she cleared her throat, her voice emerging stronger than she anticipated. "Your Honor," she began, steadying herself, "the narrative Rachel has presented defies not only the facts but the very essence of integrity that this family was built upon." A murmur rippled through the gallery as she looked toward Rachel, unfazed. It was crucial to present herself not as a victim, but as a fierce defender of her family's legacy. Drawing on her training as a lawyer, Caroline began to structure her argument with clarity. "Let us take a closer look at the evidence," she continued, her conviction rising. "Rachel's version of events lacks the transparency expected in a court of law. It's a smokescreen, crafted to confuse, and I intend to unveil it." The atmosphere shifted. The spectators leaned in, intrigue replacing the prior disdain. This was a pivotal moment, the first real turn in a fight that had felt so lopsided. She noticed Peter nodding subtly, a silent boost of encouragement that sparked a flame of determination deep within her. Caroline evaluated her next points, becoming acutely aware not just of the arguments but of how she was framing herself. "This isn't solely about monetary value," she said, her voice rising with passion. "It's about the principles I stand for: honor, truth, and the love we've built as a family. Rachel, you can manipulate information, but you cannot erase the love we shared." With each word, she revealed pieces of her story, intertwining personal reflections with legal assertions. The courtroom remained rapt, and she felt a renewed sense of agency, a far cry from the doubt that had plagued her only moments earlier. Yet as her confidence burgeoned, an insidious anxiety resurfaced. She recalled her earlier speculation about Rachel having allies, hidden agendas that loomed like shadows behind her narrative. Had Rachel's cunning extended beyond mere words? Questions gnawed at her. But with each moment on the stand, Caroline forced those insecurities aside. Beyond Rachel's deceit, she pressed on, aiming for the core values she cherished, lies the light of truth. I reflect the legacy of my husband. He believed in honesty above all, and I cannot let this accusation taint his memory. With each beat of her heart, she leaned into her vulnerability, forging a profound connection with the audience. The judge remained silent, visibly contemplating her words, while Rachel fidgeted slightly, an indication that her adversary was feeling the pressure. Caroline allowed herself a flicker of hope. Was it possible that she had turned the tide? As she moved toward the conclusion of her argument, Caroline felt an energy cascade through her, charging her as she thought about the resolve that had carried her thus far. I urge this court to see through the obfuscations presented and stand for the truth. Let my family's legacy thrive. The room buzzed with murmurs as Caroline concluded. She held herself tall, though a whisper of doubt lingered. Was the truth she had laid out enough? The doubt that loomed was a reminder that while she had fought bravely today, Rachel was still a formidable opponent. As she returned to her seat, the adrenaline still pulsing in her veins, she realized that the battle had deepened. Her encounter with Rachel had merely cracked the veneer of the issue. Caroline's heart raced at the thought of possible allies Rachel held. But there was also another realization dawning on her. The next phase would not revolve solely around courtroom tactics. It was time to dig deeper into her opponent's world and unveil whatever alliances Rachel might have nurtured. With a glimmer of resolve, Caroline thought about the steps she had to take. The battle was raging, but what would she uncover when she sought the truth beyond legal walls? The stakes had never been higher, and as her mind raced with strategies, she knew the war was far from over. The next confrontation awaited her. As the murmur settled, Caroline shifted in her seat, her thoughts racing with the unsettling possibilities that Rachel's connections might present. She couldn't dismiss the chilling notion that the stakes were far more complex than a family feud over assets. The determination she had found in the courtroom was quickly overshadowed by the realization that the battle was just beginning. The following day, she took a deliberate step back into normality, seeking clarity in the chaos surrounding her. The images of her family flooded her thoughts, moments filled with laughter, support, and undeniable love. Yet, woven among those memories, the stark reality of betrayal festered. How had Rachel, the woman who seemed to fit seamlessly into their family, become the very embodiment of deceit? Despite the whirlwind of emotions, Caroline understood she couldn't allow herself to drown in doubt. She had learned the value of preparation during her law studies, and now it was time to put that knowledge into practice. The best defense would not just be a well-structured argument in court. It would involve understanding Rachel's strategy completely. Caroline needed more than just determination. She needed intelligence and insight. That night, she resolved to comb through every detail pertaining to Rachel and her past. Friends, family, and social connections could all provide valuable data. Each interaction could reveal motivations she hadn't considered. She set her laptop on the kitchen table, her fingers poised above the keyboard as she methodically began her research. The glow of the screen illuminated a determined expression on her face as she set up social media searches, deep dives into public records, and even background checks on acquaintances who could be linked to Rachel. With each passing hour, Caroline pieced together a troubling yet insightful about Rachel's history. She noted inconsistencies in the stories Rachel told, moments where her face clouded over with nervousness during casual conversations about money. It was as if a veil had lifted. Caroline's instincts screamed at her that Rachel was not just seeking a financial windfall. She may be seeking power, influence, or perhaps revenge rooted in old grievances. The realization sparked a steely resolve within Caroline. But it wasn't merely Rachel's actions that troubled her. Doubt crept back in. Had Caroline truly been blind to Rachel's character all along? Being the family matriarch meant protecting those you love, and she felt as though she had failed somewhere along the line. As ordinary as these reflections seemed, they masked a more pressing question. Was she capable of doing what needed to be done, to rise above petty grievances and confront the monstrosity that had infiltrated her family? The next day, the tension escalated further as she arranged a lunch with one of Rachel's former colleagues, a woman who had left the company under mysterious circumstances. Caroline's stomach churned at the thought of circling back to Rachel's network to uncover truths she had never been privy to. The fear of discovery nagged at her, yet hope flickered in the recesses of her mind. Discoveries were waiting. She just needed to be brave enough to tap into them. As she walked into the cafe, the air filled with the smell of brewed coffee and fresh pastries, Caroline steeled herself. This would not just be an informal meeting. It was a strategic move in a larger war. Would this colleague provide the insight she craved? The woman sat with an air of familiarity, but Caroline felt the weight of uncertainty. Would she uncover secrets that could not only transform this court battle, but reshape the very narrative of her life? While confidence surged forth, Caroline couldn't help but wonder the deeper she dug, what skeletons might emerge that would affect her family beyond the courtroom. With her mind racing, Caroline braced for a conversation that could change everything. The stakes were reshaping in real time, and she was standing on the precipice of a revelation that could turn the tide. Caroline's heart raced as she approached the table where Rachel's former colleague sat, her mind swirling with possibilities and doubts. The woman's expression was unreadable, maintaining an air of calm that only deepened Caroline's apprehension. This meeting could be critical, not just in unearthing Rachel's past, but also in defining Caroline's own path forward. "Thank you for meeting me," Caroline began, forcing herself to adopt a confident tone. She offered a tentative smile, but the gesture felt awkward against her growing tension. "I know this is a bit out of the blue." The colleague, a woman named Veronica, nodded, her gaze steady and assessing. "I didn't expect to hear from you, but I'm intrigued. Rachel's been quite a topic lately." Caroline's throat tightened. The unexpected timeliness of the comment sent a ripple of urgency through her. Was this the opportunity she had been seeking, or just another diversion? "You worked closely with her, right? I'd like to understand what happened between you two." "I left under complicated circumstances," Veronica replied slowly, carefully choosing her words. There was a flicker of something anger, perhaps before she masked it with a practiced neutrality. "But I can tell you, Rachel always had an agenda." An agenda? The word echoed ominously in Caroline's mind. It reinforced her suspicions that Rachel's intentions were not merely financial. Driving forward, she pushed back the nagging self-doubt that insisted on flattening her confidence. "What did you mean by that?" With a deep breath, Veronica leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She has a way of charming people, gaining their trust before she strikes. You're not the first family she has tangled with, and believe me, you're not the last. I can tell you why I left, if you're sure you want to hear it." The question hung thick in the air. Caroline's instincts urged caution, but here lay the essence of her battle, embracing the discomfort of the unknown. "Yes. Please tell me everything." Veronica glanced around the cafe, before continuing. "Rachel rarely played with the cards she was dealt. I never saw it coming, but she sidelined executives, turned colleagues against one another. It was all part of the game for her. When I figured that out, there was no way I could stay." Caroline leaned back, absorbing this revelation. The implications were staggering. Rachel was not just out for money. She was weaving a web of manipulation to gain power. It sickened her to realize that under the guise of family, Rachel had created a battlefield. This was a tipping point. "Did you ever find out what motivated her?" Caroline pressed. "Was it simply ambition, or was there something more personal?" Veronica hesitated, her brow furrowing. "She refers to a past grievance, something from her childhood." "I never pressed, but whatever it is, it seems to fuel her fire." Caroline felt a rush of determination. As the pieces fell into place, she recognized that Rachel's motivations could be exploited. If she could unravel Rachel's past grievances and expose the truth, she could shift the narrative. Maybe even shift the power balance in her family. "Do you have any evidence? Anything that could help?" Caroline's voice trembled slightly with a mix of excitement and fear. Veronica's gaze softened as she considered Caroline's question. I might. But you need to tread carefully. Rachel is not just a threat, she's a mastermind. The simplicity of that notion sent tremors through Caroline's resolve. A mastermind could be undone. That was the opening she needed, and she felt her purpose sharpening into focus. As she left the cafe, a new fire lit within her. Each step on the pavement felt purposeful, driven by the knowledge that she was no longer a passive participant in this unfolding drama. There was something tangible she could fight with, something that could turn Rachel's web of deceit against her. But a lingering thought clawed at Caroline's resolve. If Rachel was a mastermind, what hidden traps could she have laid for Caroline, waiting for her to fall into them? Each revelation raised the stakes higher, and in the intricate game now set before her, Caroline felt the tension curl around her like a noose. She knew she must act swiftly and decisively, or risk losing everything she had worked to protect. The next move was vital, but what rabbit holes would her pursuit of truth unearth? Would she emerge stronger, or would Rachel's intricate tactics ensnare her next? An unseen threat loomed ahead, and with every ounce of courage, Caroline was prepared to face it. Caroline's mind raced as she navigated the bustling streets, each footfall echoing her determination. The revelations from Veronica replayed in her head like a haunting melody, each note striking a chord of urgency. Rachel's past grievances, what could they be? What darkness lay buried that might provide her with the ammunition she needed? Reaching her office, the familiar layout offered little comfort. She struggled to focus, her thoughts a chaotic storm. She needed to channel this energy into actionable steps. Rachel was a formidable opponent. If she was truly the mastermind that Veronica painted her to be, Caroline could no longer underestimate her. Setting down her bag, she approached her desk, her heart pounding as she opened her laptop. Research. That was her immediate priority. Digging into Rachel's history, exploring her professional background, her childhood, it felt like hunting for ghosts in the archives of the internet. She began typing, the keys clicking rhythmically, drowning out her anxiety. Hours flew by as Caroline immersed herself in endless articles and reports. With each tidbit of information she gleaned, a more vivid picture of Rachel emerged. She was not just ambitious. She was ruthlessly clever, moving through life with calculated precision. But beneath that exterior, Caroline glimpsed vulnerabilities, chinks in the armor that had once gone unnoticed. Reflecting on Veronica's warning, Caroline recognized the necessity to proceed with caution. If Rachel had survived in this ruthless world by manipulating others, then Caroline needed a strategy that was equally nuanced. Emotions alone wouldn't suffice. She had to think strategically. The best way to keep her guard up was to understand Rachel's motivations, not just in business, but on a personal level. Gradually, a methodical plan began to take shape. Caroline made a list of personal contacts who might offer insight into Rachel's past, people who had crossed paths with her before the corporate facade reigned supreme. If Rachel had grievances, surely there would be whispers, remnants of old wounds somewhere within that network. Still, the thought of reaching out hung over her like a shadow. What if she stirred something in Rachel that could escalate into retaliation? It was a risk, but the stakes were uncomfortably high. She couldn't allow fear to paralyze her any longer. As dusk settled outside, Caroline stood, stretching her limbs that were weary from the stiff chair. She glanced at her reflection in the glass window, a stranger gazing back. Would she recognize her fierce self when this ordeal was over? What would emerge from the battle between her and Rachel? Taking a deep breath, she gripped her phone tightly. The first call felt monumental, charged with uncertainty. She dialed the number of an old acquaintance who had known Rachel long before success defined her. After several rings, the call connected, and the familiar voice of Laura answered. Caroline. It's been ages, Laura exclaimed, a hint of surprise evident in her tone. Yes, it has, Caroline replied, diverting her thoughts away from pleasantries. I need your help with something. It's about Rachel. There was a pause, tense with anticipation. What's this about? I thought she was doing well. It's complicated. I need to understand her better. Caroline pressed gently, hoping to cultivate Laura's trust. What do you know about her childhood? Any struggles? Anything that could shed light on who she became? After a moment, Laura spoke carefully, her tone shifting. Rachel was different back then. She had a rough time, especially with her family. There were stories, whispers about how her father used to treat her. I never thought I'd say it, but those moments shaped her. Caroline's stomach dropped. It was a lead, but one fraught with danger. The thought of Rachel's past defining their present sent a shiver through her. If Caroline could unearth these shadows, they might expose the root of Rachel's manipulations. You need to be careful, Laura warned, her voice urgent. Rachel doesn't forget a slight. She is not as fragile as she may seem. The weight of the conversation sunk into Caroline. Her resolve had shifted. She was not just probing for information, but stepping into a treacherous dance with a woman caught in her own web of vengeance. With a newfound sense of purpose, she hung up, a plan slowly crystallizing. Rachel's vulnerabilities could be her greatest weapons. All she needed to do was wield them wisely. But as the night deepened, an unsettling thought gnawed at her. If Rachel learned about Caroline's inquiries, what reaction might it provoke? This dance was perilous, and the next step could spell liberation or disaster. Caroline knew confronting Rachel was inevitable, but would she be ready for the storm that confrontation would unleash? Caroline stared at the glowing screen, the light casting sharp shadows across her determined expression. She felt a mixture of anxiety and empowerment surging within. The revelations from Laura felt both like a map to navigate the treacherous waters ahead, and a heavy burden. Rachel's past was not just a tool for leverage, but a reminder of the complexities buried beneath human interaction. She had to tread softly. Exposing Rachel could ignite a fire of unintended consequences. The image of Laura's apprehensive tone lingered with Caroline as she considered her next step. She needed to gather a more extensive understanding of Rachel's formative years. Each fragment could be critical, but she had to manage her approach with tact. Diving into the vulnerabilities of another person felt akin to wielding a sword blindfolded. One misstep could lead to devastating fallout. Determined to consolidate her strategy, Caroline began formulating a plan. She made another list, this one dedicated to the skills she needed to develop. Understanding vulnerability was just one aspect. She also needed to sharpen her instincts in negotiation and psychological manipulation. Not to mirror Rachel's tactics, but to counter them effectively. Later that evening, she enrolled in an online course on negotiation, knowing it would equip her with practical skills and newfound confidence. Each module promised to transform her uncertainty into tactical astuteness. She envisioned herself engaging in high-stakes conversations without flinching, her past fear evaporating with each session. As she dived into the coursework, it didn't take long for her to realize the true value lay not in learning the techniques, but in the emotional awareness they cultivated. She could anticipate moves, understand the underlying currents in conversations. With each lesson, Caroline felt her ego reclaiming some degree of power, an exhilarating rush she had deeply missed. The further she progressed, the more she reflected on her identity and priorities. Not long ago, she felt inundated with self-doubt and second-guessing, but now those thoughts were fading like wisps of smoke. Each successful practice negotiation instilled a sense of resilience, an understanding of her own worth. A week later, Caroline's confidence surged when she met with a mutual acquaintance, Mark, who had previously worked alongside Rachel. Over coffee, she initiated the conversation, her tone light yet probing. The casual atmosphere contrasted with the tension coiling in her chest. "What do you remember about Rachel's early days at the firm?" she asked innocently. Mark leaned back, pondering her question. Rachel was always ambitious. You could see that from day one, but she had a rough patch with her family that shaped her. It wasn't all smooth sailing. His casual tone belied the weight of his words. The unsaid buried truths hung heavily in the air. Caroline probed deeper, each question a surgical strike aimed at uncovering layers of Rachel's past. By the end of their conversation, she had cobbled together chilling anecdotes that hinted at a fragile demeanor masked by a calculated ruthlessness. Sealing this information away proved tricky, though. Should she leverage this newfound knowledge? On one hand, equipping herself with the truth could give her an edge. On the other, it made her complicit in a moral struggle she had yet to fully comprehend. Back in the safety of her office, the walls felt like they were closing in. There was a mounting pressure to act, to confront Rachel with the very shadows Caroline had unearthed. But was she ready to become a catalyst for whatever reaction that might provoke? As uncertainty loomed, Caroline felt the weight of her choices pressing down. Controlling the narrative of Rachel's past could turn the tide in her favor, but it could also strip away the moral high ground she had fought so hard to maintain. The room was silent, the air thick with unspoken tension. She glanced at her phone, a reminder of Rachel lurking just beyond the digital divide, her imminent response a question. Mark. Caroline's heart raced as she realized the time had come to face the consequences of her actions. Would the next phase of their conflict open the door to clarity, or would it plunge her deeper into a labyrinth of conflict that could fracture her very identity? With every tick of the clock, Caroline's anxiety morphed into fierce determination. The moment she left the office, her mind was a whirlwind, each thought colliding with another. Would the risks she was contemplating truly shake Rachel's foundation? Yet amid the brewing storm of conflict, a tug of familiarity whispered caution. This wasn't just a game. It was a delicate dance of human emotion that she needed to navigate with care. On her way home, Caroline took a detour to the park where she often sought solace in nature. The muted colors of the autumn leaves provided a stark contrast to her tumultuous thoughts. She sat on a bench, the crisp air enveloping her, offering a moment of reflection. The sun was beginning to sink into the horizon, casting an amber glow that illuminated the fraught decisions ahead. As she pondered her plan, Caroline realized that the course she was heading down could lead not just to professional advancement, but also to personal transformation. She needed to confront her own fears regarding confrontation, fear that had stemmed from her earlier days at the firm when she felt invisible in Rachel's shadow. Sitting there, she recalled her childhood dream of being an advocate for those who couldn't speak. The awareness that she had the power to influence her environment began to light a fire within her. The stories uncovered about Rachel's past weren't merely weapons. They were also shadows of a person who, too, had struggled. What if, instead of tearing Rachel down, she could expose the truth while still preserving some semblance of humanity? Could she leverage the past for reconciliation rather than revenge? This characterization of Rachel was inherently complicated, and the conflict within Caroline deepened. After returning home, she sat at her kitchen table, breathing deeply as she drafted an email to Rachel. It started with a casual greeting, a thread of normalcy woven into her words. Then, as she hesitated over how to proceed, she chose to steer the conversation towards themes of reassurance and support. Maybe Rachel would resonate with her willingness to connect on a more human level, rather than a combative stance. As the cursor blinked on the screen, Caroline felt the tension in her chest ease, however momentarily. Was she finally ready to break free from the cycle of fear that Rachel had instilled in her? Writing the email felt like preparing for battle. Yet something different blossomed within, a realization that strategizing didn't have to equate to scheming. The moment she hit send, a wave of relief washed over her. It was a tentative step into the unknown, opening the door for candid dialogue, seeking understanding instead of conflict. Yet, there was also the nagging awareness of the potential backlash. If Rachel was cornered, the reaction could be devastating, rippling into both their lives. Just as she leaned back in her chair, lost in contemplation of her uncharted path, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Caroline's heart raced as she glanced at the screen, the name Rachel appearing in bold letters. Before she could fully process her emotions, another wave crashed in, the uncertain anticipation of the response could either rewrite the narrative or solidify the same old conflict. Would Rachel engage openly, or would this be a calculated escalation into darkness? As Caroline stared at the message, a profound question loomed over her. Could this moment be both a revelation and a turning point in her journey toward reclaiming her own identity? Caroline's hands trembled slightly as she opened Rachel's message. The screen glowed like a portal to an alternate reality, one where her choices would define not just her career but her very essence. The words began to materialize, and with each sentence, the uncertainty transmuted into an urgent reality. Rachel's reply was brief, but the implications were profound. "We need to talk. Let's meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. The piercing directness of Rachel's response filled Caroline with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Meeting face to face could either unravel her carefully orchestrated intentions or lay the groundwork for a new dynamic. The simplicity of the request belied the complexity of its potential. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was her opportunity to confront the shadows of the past and reclaim her voice. That night, sleep eluded her. Thoughts spiraled with ferocity, each one unraveling another layer of the intricate web she had spun around her relationship with Rachel. What if she made the wrong move? What if Rachel unleashed a side of her that Caroline had never witnessed? The stakes felt monumental. Caroline rose from her bed, the chill of the night air prompting her to seek clarity. She opened her laptop and turned to a blank document. It was time to strategize. As the screen illuminated her face, she began outlining her thoughts. What did she want from this meeting? This exercise became paradoxically both liberating and constraining. She needed to articulate her vision of a reconnection, a dialogue rooted in mutual respect rather than competition. Encapsulating her ideas, she recognized an underlying truth. Rachel's strengths could complement her own, if only they could navigate through their respective vulnerabilities. Days passed as Caroline indulged in this introspection. She reflected on the realities of her career, the triumphs, the missteps, and most poignantly, the courage that had been buried beneath layers of insecurity. During coffee breaks at work, she would observe Rachel, noting the walls she had built around herself. Diana, the firmess in turn, watched Caroline keenly, her admiration evident. The last thing Caroline wanted was to perpetuate a hostile workplace culture. Instead, she yearned to cultivate an environment that emphasized collaboration over rivalry. As the sun timidly peeked through the curtains, signaling morning's arrival, she felt a surge of fortitude. Caroline dressed deliberately, choosing a conservative yet assertive outfit. It felt symbolic, a suit of armor for what was to come. In the quiet of her kitchen, she rehearsed possible scenarios, her focus on the positives. With each repetition, she would lean into her will to embrace vulnerability instead of fear. Arriving at the cafe where they agreed to meet, the scent of coffee mingled with the crisp autumn air. The familiar buzz of chatter contrasted with the silence enveloping her thoughts. She glanced at her reflection in the glass, her own determination flickering back at her. Today was not just about confrontation, it was about understanding. It was about building bridges, not walls. When Rachel arrived, her demeanor was composed, but Caroline detected a layer of tension beneath the surface. The moment extended like a tightrope walk, both women teetering on the divide of their shared history. Would they bridge this gap, or would the weight of their unresolved conflict pull them back into the abyss? The stakes were raised, and Caroline was acutely aware of the pivotal nature of this encounter. With hearts racing and minds swirling, they sat opposite each other, the air thick with unsaid feelings and the power of revelation waiting to unfold. As Caroline prepared to speak, a final thought echoed through her mind. Navigating this conversation would require not just skill but a commitment to authenticity. In that moment, an unexpected resonance settled within her. She was ready to lay bare her truths, but in the back of her mind lingered a nagging dread. Was she truly prepared for the truths that Rachel might unveil? As the tension thickened in that intimate space, a question bubbled to the surface. Would the outcome empower her, or would it shatter her newfound resolve? As Caroline sat across from Rachel, her heart raced, not from fear, but from a steely determination. They had circled this table from opposite sides for far too long, engaged in a battle that threatened to consume everything Caroline cherished. Today this meeting felt different. It shimmered with a flicker of potential. The cafe buzzed around them, but for Caroline, the world narrowed to this moment. She took a breath, channeling her newfound confidence. "Thank you for meeting with me, Rachel," she began, her voice steady. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what's been happening between us." Rachel's expression glimmered with interest, though she remained guarded. Caroline pushed through the wall of tension, recalling the lessons she had learned over the tumultuous weeks. She needed to share her truths, her hopes, and maybe, just maybe, they could find common ground. "First, I want to acknowledge the struggles both of us have faced," she continued. "The pressures we're under, the expectations, I know they've taken a toll." Rachel flinched slightly at the mention of pressure, her posture instinctively tightening. Caroline seized the moment. I want us to communicate openly, to build a stronger foundation. For the sake of our family, I believe we can find a pathway forward, regardless of what has happened in the past. As her words hung in the air, Caroline sensed Rachel's defenses begin to chip away. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was an invitation. After several seconds of tense silence, Rachel leaned forward slightly, her gaze wavering. You truly think we can rebuild? Yes, Caroline replied firmly, but it requires honesty from both sides. I can't ignore the events surrounding the inheritance, and how your actions have deeply affected our family. Rachel nodded slowly, the crux of the conversation simmering beneath the surface. I realize I might have pushed too hard, she acknowledged. But my anger stemmed from feeling overlooked and unvalued in a family that should have included me. My past has made trusting others difficult. Caroline's heart softened as she processed Rachel's vulnerability. Here was the opportunity she had craved. Not just a battle for position, but a chance to understand and reconcile. Echoing the courage she had recently cultivated, Caroline responded, I felt lost addressing this iceberg of animosity. It's been a struggle, and I suspect I've only scratched the surface of your experience. Rachel's eyes shimmered, revealing a blend of embarrassment and relief. It's been lonely, she admitted. I didn't mean to tear apart what your husband built. Caroline felt a profound sense of validation ripple through her. This moment was transformative. As they continued to speak, layers of mistrust began to dissolve, replaced by a shared acknowledgement of their intertwined lives, the mistakes each had made. Gradually, the conversation shifted from blame to collaboration. Caroline proposed they form a united front to honor her husband's legacy, redirecting both their energies towards rebuilding the firm devastated by their discord. As Rachel weighed the proposal, Caroline watched hope spark in her eyes, an acknowledgement that perhaps they could both be stronger together. The meeting extended over coffee and pastries, filled with plans and possible strategies. Where once there had been only bitterness, a partnership began to form, each woman acknowledging the other's value and perspective. As they parted ways, a quiet understanding settled between them. Caroline felt a triumphant sense of achievement. She had not only confronted Rachel, but had transcended the conflict. She demonstrated her evolving self, no longer just a victim of circumstances, but a woman capable of reconciliation and leadership. The transformation was profound. Caroline returned home with renewed energy, ready not just to navigate the firm's future, but to embed the values she held sacred. There was still work ahead, but the air felt lighter now. She had proven to herself that she could reclaim her narrative. Not only had she confronted Rachel, but she had also emerged with a new ally, one who walked alongside her, ready to rebuild a family legacy grounded in love and integrity. The next chapter awaited, and Caroline stood poised, heart wide open to future possibilities. As she reflected on the day's events, a wide smile stretched across her face. This was no longer just a tale of struggle. It had become a story of unparalleled personal growth. Caroline knew the journey was far from over, but she felt solid confidence in her capability to navigate whatever awaited. Now is the time for action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories, and ensure you're part of this transformative journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Your insights matter greatly here. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread this powerful message of overcoming adversity.